Hi everyone, welcome to the One DEI thing. DEI stands for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. I am Natasha Green, the project lead for this series, and I am super excited that you decided to join or listen to this on replay. Shout out to the folks who will be replaying this. You get mad love from me also. This is an AnitaB.org webinar series in which men share one thing they did to improve their company's culture. Absolutely. There are probably tons of things these individuals are doing, but I decided one thing would be enough in the time we have together. All speakers wanted to create a culture so that employees feel that they can grow, learn, and have equal opportunity for advancement in their highest individual potential, no matter who they are, where they're from, what their race is, how they look, or even how old they are. Each speaker believes that an individual potential should not be restricted because of discriminatory practices. This initiative stems from AnitaB.org's mission, where we envision a future where the people who imagine and build technology mirror the people and societies for whom they build it. We do a lot of work connecting, guiding, and inspiring women and our allies to ensure anywhere you see technology being built, you will also see an equal representation of women building and leading those technological products or services, and getting paid fairly. I believe in order for this to happen, many individuals at all levels in the organization will have to advocate and do their part, wherever they are in the organizational chart. That person can shift an organization's culture to be inclusive and a place where everyone feels like they belong and that they are reaching their full potential. So I welcome you to the AnitaB.org's The One DEI Thing. Today we have Glenn. Glenn is a seasoned product leader with 20 plus years of experience, with his most recent role being a Senior Director of Product Management at DocuSign. He has a strong track record of leading teams in delivering high-quality products, starting from vision to delivery. He continually engages deeply with customers to understand their needs and drive those back into products they will love. Both inside and outside of work, he is passionate to help move the ball forward for diversity and inclusion, with a particular focus on bringing more diversity to product. Glenn is an advisor to several STEM-based organizations, including Code Fellows and Jewel Bots, serves on several nonprofits, and mentors and advocates focusing on women and people of color. Glenn works for Microsoft, whose mission is to empower every person, every organization on the planet to achieve more. Empowerment is the key term in this mission statement. It represents the primary objective of the company and what the strategic tactics of the organization seek to achieve. It also zeroes on two major recipients of the empowerment: the people and the organizations. Welcome, Glenn.
So as Natasha mentioned, I have over 20 years of experience, and in the last 10, I really started to focus a lot on equity, both in terms of gender and racial equity, and I'll talk a bit about that and talk about something that's been very important to me that I have seen has been a really powerful way to help level the playing field. Slides are on a different screen. So the first thing I wanted to talk about, which Natasha had asked me, is to discuss how I came to realize that things had to change. It really was a journey for me, a gradual journey. And at the end of that journey, on that journey, I started to become more and more aware of my own privilege. The idea that there are many benefits that I've received solely on the basis of me being white, me being male, me being CIS gender. And I was in the tech industry, and one of the things I noticed was when I was working at Microsoft, which was really a transformative time for me. And let me say, this is not something I was always conscious of. I realized I was very much part of the problem earlier on in my career, and fortunately we can learn and we can do things differently when we learn, and that's very much been my experience. And when I was at Microsoft, I was very involved in the community, and I started to notice what I'll call the Me Too in tech, which was kind of before the larger Me Too movement. I started to see a lot of women that were speaking out about how men were taking advantage of women in technology, how women were not getting the opportunities that they should get, how men were being abusive sexually to women, taking advantage of them, including in the workplace. And what really changed for me, honestly, was I was very involved with social media, and I just started to see a lot of very loud voices that were speaking out. First on the gender angle, and then second, really looking at inequalities from a racial perspective, particularly for Blacks and Latinos. And some of the people that I read, one that I remember very clearly who was really loud on Twitter was a woman named Shanley Kane, who helps run, has her own business, and she runs this Model View Culture business, and she was just really outspoken, speaking about her experiences in tech and how she was not treated well. I read Medium blogs like Case Houston, and just it became really, really clear, and there are a number of others, that this was like a serious problem. So that was really my wake-up call, I would say, around the gender inequality in tech. And then it took longer for me to really become aware of the racial inequalities, which actually have been there for much longer. And that was also gradual, but a lot of reading is what kind of really had me start to look at things in a different way. In addition to social media, actual reading of books. One that really was fundamental as in kind of rocking my worldview was a book, So You Want to Talk About Race by Ijoma Olu. And that was just phenomenal in terms of her willingness to share her experience as an African woman growing up in the US who was well educated, and all the experiences that she had in terms of her race and problems with the police, and just people, white people primarily, who are just completely unaware of their privilege, think that it's a level playing field when it's not, and how that played out for her. So, now I can talk about it with awareness, but if I talk about like what it was like as I was going through this transformation, initially it wasn't great. At first, I think I felt really overwhelmed, defensive, dismissive, but over time and through reflection and through listening, which is key, I started to really change my perspective. But it took years. It was not quick. And one thing that happened in the past year is I went back to school, and one of the programs in my school, the social justice program, we talked a lot about institutions, institutionalized racism, institutionalized misogyny, and how these institutions that have been established are such that we're propagating them. If we're not fighting against them, we're propagating them. So what happened with me was I started to gradually, as I talked about, accepting my privilege, and this really came to a head, I would say, in the last couple of years, just really recognizing that privilege and recognizing that I have an obligation to use that privilege to try to help remove barriers. And also recognizing that some of those barriers I had actually helped create. And that was not easy. And I find, today, many times when I talk to people and you try to have these conversations, often they get very defensive. So, and I was there, so I understand that. But fortunately, through whatever fate, I was able to kind of start to see things in a new way. So I would say the one thing, when I was asked to think about like what is the one thing, and there's many things I could mention, but one that I have found has been extremely successful in helping to level the playing field for women, for people of color, is mentorship. And that's what I want to talk about with the rest of this talk. and I have experienced being a mentor for many years, both within organizations and outside of organizations, both for men, for women of color, for Black women. So I can speak from experience and having seen what really has worked and what has not worked. Now, I had many mentors throughout my career, and they really helped me to get to the next level, because that's what a mentor can do. And I realized that the way I had received that help, that there was a gap, and there was a lot of data that supported this, that showed that particularly women and people of color did not have as much access to mentoring as white men did. So as I started to become aware, I started to realize, like, this is something I can do. I've seen the value of mentoring and how it helped me in my own career. I can use that to help others. And so I started mentoring. And I can absolutely say that I have seen it to have a significant effect in helping people with their careers, helping them overcome obstacles and get where they want to go. So that is my one thing. And again, it's not the only thing. There was a recent survey that showed that 30% of women and 32% of minorities had said that mentoring had been extremely important to their progression. So let's talk a little bit about what is a mentor. So a mentor is an advisor, a guide, a supporter, someone who takes you under their wing and helps you get where you want to go. And they don't actually have to be in your organization. Many of the mentees that I've had have not been within my organization, but I've absolutely mentored a lot of people within organizations. So what does mentoring really look like? Well, it starts with having a commitment and a willingness to really try to want to help. And then there has to be some type of agreed frequency that you meet. Those meetings can be virtual, so COVID-19 is not stopping mentoring from happening. As a matter of fact, a large number of my mentoring has actually been done through Zoom, through online mediums like Slack. A key thing I think about mentoring is having to have an overall plan. Where is the mentee that you're working with trying to get to? Like, what goals are they trying to achieve? It's important that there's that understanding. It's important that there's an agenda, that it's not just, people spending time together, because it's spending time for a purpose. As a mentor, you're there specifically to help this person get where they want to go. You're not there to have them do your bidding. That is what I would consider bad mentoring. You're there to help them. Really important also to periodically calibrate. Oh, sorry. So how does it help? Because I've talked about how I've mentored many people over the last 10 years, and I've seen what those benefits are. Well, one of the biggest things I've seen, particularly for women, is that mentoring builds confidence. And I have been amazed at just how valuable that has been, just me being able to tell a woman who is questioning her ability, whether she's going to be able to succeed in her role, that you can do this, that I will help you, that you're completely capable of doing this. It may sound like a small thing, but I have seen it to actually be huge. And I was surprised how much it was, because what I found when I mentored men is often they didn't need that. And this is not a product. This is not some type of weakness in women. This is a product of this institutionalized society we've been in that has always kept women down. Mentoring will help navigate career growth. It did that for me, but I have absolutely seen how I have been able to help women get to where they want to go, because the idea of a mentor is somebody who has experience. They've been to the place where you as a mentee are trying to get to. Another thing that mentoring can help with is providing psychological safety. And again, I'm talking about good mentoring, which I'm going to get into in a bit. So psychological safety is really providing an environment where the mentee can freely share without worrying that they're going to be judged. And what I have found in my experience is that women feel judged all the time. And so creating that kind of environment where they're not feeling that judgment is extremely important. Mentoring can build skills because, again, you as a mentor should have a set of experiences that you can actually bring and give to the mentee. And the last one I'll talk about, which also gets into another term that is often used, which is called sponsorship. And a great book that I recommend is by Minda Harts, which is called The Memo. And she talks about what is called a success partner. And the memo is specifically focused on the challenges of women of color and Black women. But I think as a mentor, there's a lot of good insights in that book of what are the challenges that women of color are facing and that women are facing that that a mentor can be cognizant of and help them to navigate. So creating opportunity. One is I can bring the mentee into my network. I can introduce them to other people that will help them to achieve their goals. And I have done this and I have seen this. And I can also make sure that I advocate for my mentor, like if they're in my company, when I'm in discussions, that they're not present in the room. And a lot of time, Minda talks about this in her book as bringing people into the room. So a mentor can bring people into the room that are not in the room. Now, again, there's this gray line between mentor and sponsorship. For me, I've always seen the two intrinsically tied, meaning that if I'm mentoring someone, then the real fulfillment of that is being able to actually step up for them, not just kind of guide them and advise them, but really go to bat for them to try to help them get the opportunities. Oh, sorry. So let's talk a little bit about what makes a good mentor. So I talked about commitment. Commitment is really important. There is no mentoring without having a bi-directional commitment. And so the commitment on the side of the mentor is to actually help the mentee get where they want to go, be available. But the mentee also has to have a commitment, willingness to learn, being committed to, to working with the mentor and actually not necessarily following all of the advice, but at least being open to it, considering it, working. I like to talk about a mentoring contract that doesn't have to be formal, but at least verbal. And one thing I think that is really important is that a mentee has to want to have a mentor. You can't force yourself as a mentor onto a mentee. It has to be something that the mentee actually accepts and wants and is willing. And if not, there's no mentoring relationship there. Active listening is really, really important to be a mentor. And empathy. I would argue that you're not going to be successful as a mentor if you're not building empathy, because your ability to really help the person that you're trying to help is based on building that understanding their challenges, building trust. And then a last one I'll talk about is respecting boundaries. And this is, incredibly important, especially when there are, when it's cross-gender situation, that we treat each other professionally and respectfully. So those are really important things. I'm a big fan of, in the mentoring relationships that I've had, having, being in the same physical room if we can, but maybe in a place that is safe, like it could be in a cafe, or it could be at an office, or it could be virtual with video. But sometimes a mentee that I'm working with is not comfortable with that, and that's part of respecting those boundaries. The reason why I prefer it is because being able to see the body language, and even talking about empathy, we express empathy with our facial expressions. We express understanding. So those are a bunch of things. I know we're probably running out of time. We ran a little bit late. The biggest bad mentoring thing I will say, I'll say two things. I mentioned one, which is like, as a mentor, this is not a way for you to just get somebody else to do work for you. That is not mentoring. It's also not a way for you to just get a better review or something if your company is supporting mentoring. Mentoring is service. And the other thing, but it is not a dating service. So I'll just leave that and won't get into more depth on that. So the last thing I wanted to talk about is, what can organizations do to create, a good mentoring culture? And I've been involved with many programs at different organizations, and I've seen what worked and what didn't work. And so one of the most important things is that program is, if there is an established mentoring program, and organizations can do this, and I would say should do this, that program has to be accessible and equitable. It needs to be available to everyone. And I've been in some companies, even really large ones, for example, where you couldn't get into the program until you were at the company for a year. I'm really not a fan of that. Often the people that need mentoring the most are those who are earliest in their career, and they're being left out. But the other thing, in terms of equity, is making sure, from a gender perspective, from a race perspective, that all of these resources really are provided equally. And that takes work. It doesn't just happen. So I'm describing this. The work to do it is much harder, but I have seen it done, and it can be done. Another thing I think is that companies should encourage employees to mentor and should educate them on mentoring. Don't just throw people in and say, you're a mentor, which is what most companies do. I'm shocked about it. There's no orientation of principles of like, this is what mentoring is. Many companies do that with managers too, which is also bad. So I think there should be education, and mentors should be incentivized, and mentees. Now, let me say what I mean by incentivized. I do not mean with cash. I think that promotes the wrong type of culture. But what I mean by incentivized is supported, that management will say, hey, it's great that you're mentoring, and I understand that this is going to take some time out of the work that you're doing. And guess what? The work that you're doing for mentoring is not going to count for zero. It's actually going to be included when we look at you and look at your performance. And hey, mentee, like, you're going and trying to get a mentor to help you to grow, that should be applauded, and that is going to be appreciated. And then the last thing I'll say about the equitable mentoring program is looking at blind, if you are going to use any kind of algorithms, make sure they're blind algorithms. Make sure it's not allowing, because if it's not done in that way, then we know from the data that naturally the inequalities are going to be there, and certain people are going to be left out. So that's really those are the main things that I wanted to talk about. I am definitely a big believer in mentoring, and I'll close on this note. You don't need to wait for your organization. It is great if organizations have this program, but any individual who wants to do this, who is sincere about really helping people, can do this. I've been doing it for a long time, both within organizations and outside organizations. I've seen many people grow in their careers, and I've done it without being in an official program. But again, I think those programs should exist and they would help mentoring to be more scalable and get more people involved. Just wanted to share a couple of resources. One great book, so there's a number of books I've read. Better Allies by Karen Caitlin is a really, really good book. I definitely recommend it. The memo I've talked about is fantastic. So You Want to Talk About Race? I mean, I wish almost every white person would read this book. It is unbelievable, but it's difficult. I mean, it's definitely not lighthearted reading, but it's a message that people really need to hear. And then I've shared some great articles below, and I'll share my slides. Janice Gossam is a friend who writes for Forbes, who's written a great article on diversity and inclusion and how that relates to how important that is for mentorship to be effective. And then there's another article I've shared with some additional tips. So that's it for my presentation. Hope this was helpful. I've shared my LinkedIn info in the slides, and I'll definitely get the slides out there with my notes. And really appreciate this opportunity. And I love Anita B. I've not been to Grace Hopper yet. I'll say yet, but I am going to get there. It is definitely on my list of places to go. And it was an honor to present today.